This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Are you a Halloween person?
I can go either way on it.
So I picked what I did this year. I had mentioned to you like we should do something Halloweenish, and you sent me some of those listicles. And I was gonna just pick one case, but I thought since it's Halloween, we would cover like multiple cases. And these are just sort of things that happened on Halloween.
Did you say listicle?
Yeah, listicles. So
Did you make that up?
No, I don't think I made that up. Somebody that I used to do like creative stuff with a long time ago. That was they started saying that even before podcasts, they would say listicles, where you would see like the top 10, top 5, whatever.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a word.
What is the definition?
It's a noun, a piece of writing or other content presented wholly or partly in the form of a list, a listicle.
Yeah, it's a listicle. So Halloween has like a lot of interesting crimes that have occurred. I don't get too into the solved ones because they tend to be pretty graphic if people are putting them on a list somewhere. Today's list is actually older, and it actually comes from Robin Warder. And if you guys don't know who Robin Warder is, he's a really interesting podcaster. So he has a podcast called The Trail Went Cold, and it's always a good podcast to check out. He's been the host over there for probably 300 episodes, maybe a little more than that. But he started out writing these listicles. Now, he's been involved in a number of the bigger scandals that have come across related to the podcast Crime Junkie. Basically, Crime Junkie used to sort of word for word take other podcasters' material. And with Robin, they would take stuff from his podcast, The Trail Went Cold, but they would also take stuff from his Reddit posts. And that's one of the reasons, like, since we started, I've either tried to use the other people's voices, or actually read something off and sort of state who it came from because of things like that happening in sort of the podcasting, particularly the true crime industry. Crime Junkie has definitely done a lot of borrowing from other people without credit and other sketchy stuff. But they're also, they're not investigators. They're not even journalists. All they are is two people with sort of a talk show style catering towards a very specific audience. And they do that well. But I thought it was interesting that this list of 10 creepy unsolved Halloween mysteries that happened on Halloween from 2014 came from Robin Warder. And I pulled it up and I looked at it. I will go ahead and say that a couple of the things that were on the list are no longer unsolved. Specifically, number 6 he has on his list is the identity of Arne Sachs. And here's what Robin says. He says, on Halloween in 1979, the unidentified body of a young woman was found in a concrete culvert near Interstate 35, just outside of Georgetown, Texas. The victim appeared to be in her 20s and had been sexually assaulted before she was strangled to death. It seemed likely she was murdered that very same day, and the only unique clue to her identity was a silver oval-shaped ring on her hand. The victim was nude, and the only garment of clothing she had on was a pair of orange socks. Since the young woman was never identified, Orange Socks became her nickname. Years later, serial killer Henry Lee Lucas confessed to the murder of Orange Socks. He even stated he had sex with her corpse after she was dead. However, Lucas did not know the woman's identity. He claimed he picked her up while hitchhiking and only remembered that her name was Joni or Judy. After being sentenced to death for the woman's murder in 1984, Lucas recanted his confession in order to have his sentence commuted. Indeed, further investigation showed that Lucas was likely working in Florida on the day of the murder. And Lucas was notorious for frequently confessing to murders he never committed. No one is sure how many people he actually killed. Henry Lee Lucas died in prison in 2001, but Orange Socks is not the only identified murder victim he has been connected to. I will just go ahead and say that she's not Joni or Judy or any of those names. Orange Socks was identified. She was identified roughly 40 years after the fact. And I looked recently on her Wikipedia page. Her name is Deborah Louise Jackson, and she was identified August 6, 2019. And the DNA Doe Project had a potential cousin they had identified through their research, and they issued a revised sketch which caught the attention of Deborah Jackson's sister. A member of Jackson's family visually identified the decedent based on morgue photos and physical characteristics. Jackson's sister then submitted a saliva-based DNA kit, and the results confirmed the two were related. Jackson was last seen around 1977, and she had never been reported missing. So the way that she plays into Halloween is she died either October 30th or October 31st, 1979. And as we know, and if you're listening here, you can go back and listen again. I can answer the question of who Henry Lee Lucas killed. The answer is no one, ever, under any circumstances. And I know people don't like that. But I noticed on the Wikipedia page that they still point out that he is convicted of her murder and the likely perpetrator. Go ahead. I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Well, yeah, this is actually one of the reasons I was interested in this particular listicle, because it did bring Henry Lee Lucas into it. And, Henry Lee Lucas was not a serial killer. He made a complete farce out of all serial killer investigations. And this showed that he had no bounds, basically, based on his confession, saying that he had sex with her corpse after she was dead. He would just say anything, right?
Yeah, quite literally.
Unfortunately, because he made that false confession and he continues to be linked to her, her real killer's not been found.
Right. And will never likely be found unless people start... people doubt Henry Lee Lucas now in this case. They're like, oh, we don't know how many people he killed. Even Robin refers to that here. The truth is, even with his mom actually died of a heart attack. And it was precipitated by an assault that she did on him. She basically assaulted him, and then he defended himself, and she died. She had a heart attack and died. But Henry Lee Lucas, just for the record, didn't kill anyone.
What about Ottis Toole's niece?
I don't believe that that's the one where I'm not sure what happened there, but I'm pretty sure
it wasn't a serial killer killing. If he killed her, because he got mad, that might be something. What was her name? I can't remember now.
Are you talking about Becky?
Becky, yeah. And so she died, right?
Right.
And my impression was if he had killed anybody, she was probably the only person he killed. But I wasn't convinced that he had killed her, and I'm 150% sure that he was not a serial killer.
Yeah, there's two questionable killings I have that I'm not fully satisfied when it comes to Ottis and it comes to Henry Lee Lucas. The only two questions I have are about Frida Powell, who is known as Becky, and she is Ottis Toole's adolescent niece, and Kate Rich. So those are the two questions I have as to whether they killed them or not. I have a feeling that both of those situations are probably explained. I'll just say it this way. I believe it's likely that Becky Powell was left in a locked car and died. And I believe it's likely that Kate Rich was neglected and died. More than I believe that they killed her, either one of the hers.
And Ottis Toole didn't kill anybody.
Correct.
He wasn't a murderer.
Correct.
it's possible that Henry Lee Lucas might have uh, done some adverse things in those two cases you just mentioned, but he was not a murderer, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could maybe like hang some felony murder in there with my theories of those two cases, but it's not a murderer the way they're presented as murderers.
Not at all, and it's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame.
And the fact that it hasn't gotten cleared up, I mean, it's never going to get cleared up because their infamy precedes them, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so that's number 6 on Robin's listicle. Number 5 on the listicle is Walker County Jane Doe. And so here's what was on the list originally in 2014. On the morning of November 1st, 1980, a truck driver discovered the nude body of a teenage girl next to Interstate 45, just outside of Huntsville in Walker County, Texas. The victim had been sexually assaulted before she was beaten and strangled to death. Since the young girl was never identified, she was simply to become known as the Walker County Jane Doe. It's estimated that she had been murdered several hours before her discovery, and a potentially interesting backstory began to emerge for this girl when witnesses came forward to report they had interactions with her on Halloween night. After being let out of a vehicle by an unidentified male at a nearby South End Gulf station, Jane Doe had reportedly asked numerous people for directions to the Ellis Unit prison, claiming she had plans to visit a friend there. However, when her photograph was circulated among the inmates at Ellis Unit, no one would admit to knowing her. Later that night, a truck stop waitress had a similar conversation with Jane Doe. The girl claimed she was 19 years old, hailed from the Aransas or Arkansas Pass area, and seemed to imply that her parents did not care about her. Since this girl was killed exactly 1 year after the Orange Socks murder, and there were numerous similarities between the two crimes, Henry Lee Lucas was considered a possible suspect. However, there was never any evidence to connect Lucas to the murder, and the Walker County Jane Doe remains unidentified. So she's in here as well, which the reason I bring these two up first, even though they're 5 and 6 on the list, is so this young lady, Walker Jane Doe, who was supposedly there to visit a prisoner at Ellis Unit, she's been identified as Sherry Ann Jarvis. She was actually from Forest Lake, Minnesota, even though her body was discovered in Huntsville, Texas. And the efforts to identify her, they went for a really, really, really long time. Even in 1999, her remains were exhumed, which that was strictly for the purpose of obtaining a DNA sample from her body. A second forensic examination of her body revised the likely age of Walker County Jane Doe to between 14 and 18. Investigators stated they believed the most likely age was between 14 and a half and 16 and a half years old. Now, in November of 2015, the case was officially reopened. And this case ends up with the Walker County Sheriff's Office partnering up in 2020 with Othram Incorporated. Now, Othram Incorporated attempted to identify Walker County Jane Doe through genetic genealogy. Initial attempts to extract usable genetic materials from her remains had been unsuccessful, but testing on preserved tissue samples yielded usable DNA. And they used that to generate a genetic profile and construct a family tree. Through this family tree, living relatives of the victim were identified and located, and DNA swabs from those individuals were used to confirm the identity of Walker County Jane Doe in 2021. So on November 9th of 2021, the Walker County Sheriff's Office publicly announced that her identity was 14-year-old Sherry Ann Jarvis, and she had run away from Stillwater, Minnesota in 1980. She was known as Toddy to her friends. She had been removed from her home, and she had been placed under her the state's as a ward of the state at age 13 due to habitual truancy, and she had run away shortly after her 14th birthday. Her final contact with her family had been a letter that she penned to her mother from Denver in August of 1980. And in this letter, Jarvis indicated frustrations at being placed in state custody, but her intentions were to eventually return home. The investigation into her murder as of the time that we're recording this, it's ongoing, supposedly, and that investigators have stated that they have leads based off of, finding out her identity. I haven't seen any of those leads. I remember at one point seeing like this huge list of exclusions. But my point is, with this listicle, that is no longer an unsolved Halloween case. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Did you find any of the other ones had been solved? I found like a sort of solved one in there, but the rest of them weren't really.
No, I haven't. I'm not entirely sure about any of them, but I do know that Henry Lee Lucas is also not responsible for the Walker County Jane Doe.
Yes.
Tati Sherry Jarvis.
Yeah. Her cause of death was ligature strangulation. It was thought that it could have been with pantyhose, and they found fragments inside of the Jane Doe's underwear, and the underwear had been shoved inside of her, probably to prevent her from bleeding as she was transported to where she was discovered. Yeah. So I guess we'll go to the top of the list and just start with this 1981 case that Robin has at number 10. And so this is the murders of Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman. Now, sometime during the early morning hours of Halloween 1981, a Manhattan couple named Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman were murdered in their apartment, which was located near Greenwich Village. The couple was severely beaten before being shot in the head, execution style, and the apartment was completely ransacked. Sisman was rumored to be involved in drugs, so authorities initially believed that to be the motive for the killings. However, the case took a pretty bizarre turn when a prison informant claimed that one of his fellow inmates had somehow predicted the crime weeks before it actually happened. Now, that inmate turned out to be none other than the notorious Son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz. In 1977, Berkowitz was convicted of a series of shootings which took the lives of 6 victims and left 7 others wounded. There's always been speculation that Berkowitz was involved with a satanic cult and did not commit all the Son of Sam murders on his own. According to the informant, Berkowitz had told him that this cult was planning to enter a residence near Greenwich Village on Halloween. They would perform a ritual murder by shooting a couple in the head before ransacking the place to remove incriminating evidence. When questioned about this, Berkowitz claimed that Sisman possessed snuff footage of one of the Son of Sam shootings and was planning to hand it over to the authorities to avoid some drug charges. While no evidence was found to support Berkowitz's claims, he did provide an eerily accurate description of Sisman's apartment. No one knows that the murders of Sisman and Platzman had anything to do with the Son of Sam case, and they are still unsolved. So what I'm pulling from there is directly from Robin's words, but this case comes up every Halloween. Have you ever heard of it or read about it?
Yes.
Do you have any like overall opinions of what happened to them?
Not really. I've never looked into it very, beyond just the recap,
Yeah.
But they were each beaten and shot in the back of the head, right?
Correct. And there was a huge age difference. I just want to point that out. He was 39. She was 20.
Right. And so I don't know. Did they establish if their apartment had been robbed, or was it just ransacked?
They don't really establish that. The gist of this is, okay, so they're living in a duplex apartment that's on the 3rd floor of a building in Chelsea in Manhattan. Ronald Sisman was known as a cameraman at the time and a photographer. He operated 2 separate businesses out of this house. When they got in there, the one thing that is listed, according to various sources, as being missing is a .25 caliber handgun that was registered to Ron. Their identification had been removed from their bodies, and there had been another recent break-in where I don't know the origin of the break-in story, but what I did find was that there was sort of Ron had applied for 2 gun permits because of this other break-in. There's a couple things going on here beyond this. Cinemaholic ran a story on this. It comes up in some David Berkowitz materials. The police speculate that the attacker or the attackers might have known Ron because there was no signs of forced entry. And again, I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it now because it's part of this. Their identification had been removed from their bodies. The initial investigation leaned towards a possibility that the intruders might have been looking for drugs because the house was turned over and the furniture had been cut and torn apart. Now, the previous year, an actress named Melanie Haller had accused Ron of attempting to force her to take drugs, but the charges against Ron were dropped because Melanie didn't want to cooperate with the authorities. The police think, or at least at that time they thought, that the two cases were probably not connected. Then we have this David Berkowitz tip that comes in. And there's no like concrete proof of that. But what they did come up with is David Berkowitz, in a 1997 interview, he mentioned something similar. He talked about the presence of another van at the time that this shooting took place. And when Maury asked him whether Ron was the one who was recording this snuff film, David said that Ron wanted to do some filming that night. Beyond that, he got vague and he did not divulge any new information. But the idea was that Ron had captured the murder of Stacy Mauskowitz, who was Son of Sam's last victim, on film, and that Ron had been in the van recording this from a distance.
How was David Berkowitz? Well, I'm just saying it seems inappropriate, but whatever. So the theory was, and you know that's a plausible scenario, but it seems like
this all comes from a interview in 1997 that Maury Terry did with David Berkowitz.
I don't know who that is.
Maury Terry is, I think you at that time would have been Inside Edition, maybe.
Well, I would buy that. Actually, no, I don't buy it because David Berkowitz is already in custody. So who cares if he has a snuff film?
I think the idea was it wasn't the snuff film that was the big deal. The big deal was that it was going to reveal that David Berkowitz was not really operating alone. So do you know much about Berkowitz?
No, I mean, I know a little bit because, timing and what he was convicted of. But
so
really.
he has 6 killed, 11 wounded as far as victims go, and that includes 2 stabbings from 1975. But the Son of Sam killings were from July 1976 to July of 1977. And the idea was that possibly Berkowitz was operating in concert with like multiple people. There's this whole satanic cult claims is how they write it up. It's a little more nuanced than that, but at the end of it all, whatever was going on there, Berkowitz was definitely either involved or both involved and scapegoated. He gets apprehended August 10th, 1977, and he's still alive, but he's ultimately the person who goes down for whatever happened with the Son of Sam killings. He is creepy. I'll give him that.
Well, and if he had a tape, I mean, and it was going to reveal somebody else, obviously whoever it was going to reveal is probably responsible for the murders. I do think it's odd that they removed their identification, like they wouldn't know who lived there.
Criminals do stupid shit. I never really know what, like, I was listening to something recently and they were talking about just having no expectations when it comes to investigating certain things. And I think for some reason, I think that's really accurate. I don't know how to explain like a lot of things that happened with Berkowitz. He's interesting to me, to be honest with you. I'm not interested in his case anymore, but there are aspects of it that are interesting to me because it's just so bizarre. All the letters and all these, the ways the killings went down. They're not like typical serial killer nonsense to begin with. And
He committed a series of shootings. That's how I see that, and it's not even the least bit interesting to me.
well, that's the reason we don't cover it here, is because it's not interesting from the perspective of, is it solved or is it not solved? It's really just like, it's truly bizarre criminal behavior that doesn't really make sense in terms of, like, if we boiled our stuff down and we were like, okay, these are all domestics, these are all randoms, these are all acquaintance murders, these are all assholes, which a lot of people fall into that category, and these are the serial killers. Like, Berkowitz doesn't really fall into any of those categories, and he's definitely sort of an asshole killer, but he doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to what he was doing, and I think that makes him particularly scary. But ultimately, he's caught, so I lose a lot of my interest there. Although I appreciate that this murder was like on this list, because it's a Halloween murder that it's pretty creepy.
It is really creepy, and there's no question that there was. It was probably motivated by money or revenge of some sort, and I would go just as easily to say that they were trying to get the supposed snuff film back, or that there was an issue with one of his drug dealers, or who knows. I mean, but it was a robbery.
Yeah, my problem with that is, okay, so Berkowitz has the information, right? And he's telling someone about this information.
Right.
Well, why would the people tell him about it? Is he the one who gave them info? Because, like, ultimately, what is this going to show? It's going to show Berkowitz committing the shooting and other people are with him, or it's going to show someone else committing the killing? Because no matter what you say there, it makes no sense for people to be on the, because Berkowitz is in jail for multiple years. Like, he's been in jail for at least 2 years when this happens. So if he's in jail, why does he have that information? And if
I could just say that somebody told him, I guess, but it doesn't make any sense.
Well, why would he tell anyone else?
Well, I don't know. Like, I've never thought that angle made sense, and I don't know that he gave them enough identifying information for it to really be linked, because it doesn't sound like it was like super special, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It was literally like a ransacked robbery.
Yeah, and then the Maury Terry interview, he's vague about it, so he doesn't really get into the details. But
so why even bring anything up if you're not going to give the whole story? That's so weird.
It's another aspect of Berkowitz that is what puts him on my list as interesting. Like, it's not even like,
I think that was his point.
Yeah, maybe that could be it. It could be to stay relevant.
Well, that's what it sounds like to me. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he came forward with this information to stay relevant.
Huh. That's interesting. I mean, that's how he makes this. He makes the top 10 list of Robin's listicle here. Now, number 9, I had never heard of this. Had you ever heard of this girl?
Yeah, I had.
I knew nothing about this. So number 9, the little blurb that's on the listicle is it's about a girl from Pennsylvania. So this is Hyun-Yong Cindy Song. So she goes by Cindy, but her name is Hyun-Yong Song. She was a 21-year-old South Korean student attending Pennsylvania State University. And in 2001, she dressed up in a bunny costume and attended a Halloween party at a nightclub in State College. After leaving the club, Cindy spent the next few hours hanging out with her friends before she was dropped off at her apartment at 4 a.m. This was the last that anyone ever saw of her. After Cindy was reported missing, a search was conducted of her apartment. There was no sign of any struggle, but many of her belongings, including the false eyelashes from her costume, were there, indicating she had gone inside after being dropped off. But what happened to her afterward? Well, shortly thereafter, a witness reported seeing a woman resembling Cindy in the Chinatown district of Philadelphia. This woman was inside a vehicle with an unidentified male and crying out for help. A bizarre lead came about in 2003 when a man named Hugo Marcus Selinski was arrested after the remains of 5 people were found buried in his backyard. Even though none of those remains belonged to Cindy, an informant told police that Selinski and an accomplice named Michael Jason Kurkowski Jr. had abducted her. After Cindy was raped and murdered, the 2 men allegedly buried her body at another location. Kurkowski's remains were found in Selinski's backyard, and the informant claimed that Kurkowski was murdered for keeping Cindy's bunny ears as a souvenir. Thus far, no evidence was found to tie Selinski to Cindy's disappearance, but in January of 2014, the remains of more people were found buried on his property. It remains to be seen if any of them will be identified as Cindy Song. So this sent me down this massive rabbit hole about this Hugo guy. And I literally had never heard of any of this. But it had made, I was surprised to find it had made Unsolved Mysteries, but I guess I had just missed it. I went on and I pulled up the Unsolved Mysteries description of all this. And they elaborate a little bit more here. And here's what they say. Cindy Song grew up in South Korea, moved to Virginia in 1995 to live with her aunt and uncle and attend high school. She went to Pennsylvania State University, and this is now Halloween 2001. She's a senior and went to a costume party at Players Nightclub with 2 close friends, Stacy Pack and Lisa Kemp. She was dressed as a Playboy bunny. They partied until 2 in the morning when they left, and then they stopped off at a friend's apartment to play video games. Okay, at 4 a.m., they dropped Cindy off at her apartment, and she's never seen again. A search of Cindy's apartment found that there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. And they found the false eyelashes that Robin mentioned. And they found her backpack and her cell phone. The only thing that was missing was her purse. And inside her purse would have been her driver's license and her credit cards. They believe that she was still wearing her Playboy bunny costume when she vanished because it was not found in her apartment. They did an analysis of her phone, and it found that she had not made or received any calls after she was dropped off. There was also no activity on her credit cards, and there was no suspicious activity on her emails. Police and volunteers searched a wooded area near the campus, but no trace of Cindy was found. And authorities don't believe she ran out of town because they found 2 Britney Spears concert tickets in her apartment. And there was a printout for a computer that was due to be received on November 6th that was also found. And her friends and relatives said she was not the type of person to just disappear, and they don't believe she was depressed or suicidal. Her friends remembered she was happy and upbeat the night she vanished, and authorities believe that Cindy left her apartment to go to a 24-hour supermarket nearby and that she was abducted there or on the way. Another theory was that she left her apartment with someone she knew and was killed by them. A few days after she disappeared, a woman matching her description was seen in Philadelphia being forced into a car by an unidentified man. Police do not know who he was or if the woman was her, but they would like to question him. And there is a $27,000 reward available in this case. It goes on to talk a little bit more about stuff. And the results are, so this case first aired on the September 18th, 2002 episode of Unsolved Mysteries, according to their little wiki thing that they do over on Fandom. And they have a results section. Okay. It says it's unsolved. Investigators have stated they no longer believe that the woman calling for help in Philadelphia was Cindy. In 2003, police connected Cindy's disappearance to a bank robber and suspected serial killer named Hugo Selinski. And he had a co-defendant that told police that he and an accomplice, Michael Kurkowski, had abducted and killed a woman from State College. And then it's pretty much the same story. And yet, at the end of it, the informant claims that Cindy was buried in another place, but still on that property. Authorities believe that the informant was telling the truth because his information on the first 5 bodies turned out to be correct. He had also they put on the record that Selinsky had confessed to kidnapping Cindy, but claimed that Kurkowski killed her and kept her bunny ears as a souvenir. In 2006, Selinsky was acquitted of the murder of 2 drug dealers who were found on his property. He was, however, convicted of abusing their remains. And in 2014, authorities announced that the badly destroyed remains of 7 other people were found on his property. They looked into whether one of those sets belonged to Cindy, but she has not yet been linked to them. So Selinsky's attorney and a private investigator who ended up being involved in a witness intimidation case and other crimes related to his case. And they wrap it up with, in 2015, he was convicted of the murders of Kurkowski and his girlfriend, Tammy Fassett. They were found on the property, and he was sentenced to life in prison. He's still considered a suspect in Cindy's case, but her body has not been found. And he is an associate of Stephen Martin, who is a suspect in the disappearance of Felicia Thomas and the murder of Jennifer Barzalowski. However, it is not believed that those cases are connected to this one. I will just say that reading about Hugo Marcus Selinsky is horrifying. When I say the name Hugo Selinsky, what do you picture, like, people-wise?
Nothing. I don't know.
Well, he's going to come up in another episode because he has done a lot of shit, and now I've been able to pull up his court records.
Well, I feel pretty confident that he is responsible for Cindy Song's disappearance and death. And it really stinks when somebody, like, now you said it was a co-defendant, but whoever it was, the informant, got the courage up to, like, give them information, and there was nothing they could do with it.
Yeah, man, there is so much going on with this guy. I'll just say I agree with you. I think he is responsible for Cindy Song, and I think the scenarios we hear here related to this other guy and him abducting her, I think that's likely what happened to her. I do hope eventually somehow she's found and this case is closed out. But at the same time, like she's one of those cases. I like look at her and I look at like the possibilities, and I think I really hope she got away somewhere and just like some. But I know it didn't happen. Like I know, like realistically, that's not what happened.
I mean, because why would that guy come forward with that information so specific, right?
It's super specific, and it's absolutely bonkers terrifying. And I never would have read that if you had not sent me this listicle. I don't know how I missed this guy, but this Hugo guy.
It's funny to me because the rumor from the informant was that Michael Kurkowski was killed because he kept Cindy Song's bunny ears. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and like
he kept the bodies.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I was going to say.
He's got these
like
bodies.
12 bodies in his yard, and he's mad because somebody kept some bunny ears.
It's bonkers. I don't want to give away anything about him right this second. I don't want to go too deep into his case. Do you know why?
I don't know.
Okay, so anything else about Cindy Song? I'm pretty sure that this wraps up Cindy's case.
Well, I think that the investigators feel like her case is wrapped up as well.
Yeah, but like this one, I think they would do something if they had a credible tip about the body. But it makes me want to go like dig through that guy's case and like find out where those bodies are. You know what I mean?
Have you seen where those bodies that have been found have been identified?
No, not yet. That's what I'm saying to you right now. Like, it makes me want to do that.
Like, how long ago was it that they found them?
It was a long time ago. It was in 2003, I think. I don't know.
So that's like 20 years ago. They're not going to identify those bodies.
Well, we're going to go into that case in another episode.
Well, it seems like there would be some missing people that might match up there.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. I know they've identified some of them. I'm just saying I don't know about that last group of stuff. Also, when I was reading about this one, what was confusing about it, it has some mainstream media coverage, but some of the mainstream media is confusing. At first, I thought I read about 5 bodies and then 12 bodies, and I
Yeah.
had to sort of go back through and like parse out that they were really talking about a total of 12 bodies. But I was reading this in like the middle of the night, and honestly, like I was reading like court records and stuff on him. I was just starting to thumb through it, and it was starting to scare me because I was like, for like 2 reasons, I was like, oh my god, there's another one, and then it would describe like, and then they found another set of remains, and I'm like, I can't keep track of what they're saying because this guy's just blandly recounting this, and then I was like, am I that desensitized to things that like reading about 12 bodies being discovered in 2 incidents on one guy's property isn't absolutely bonkers to me?
It's pretty bonkers, man.
Okay, so back to Robin's list, number 8. This is the murder of a little girl named Nema Louise Carter. Have you ever heard of her? Have you ever heard of her?
I have, yeah.
So I had not heard of her. I had heard of the other crime, and then I realized that I had read about it like in one of those things where talking about another crime, they sort of mentioned that a similar thing has happened, and I didn't realize it was that case. And this one is like, I guess it's unsolved, but it doesn't. I don't think of it as unsolved. Do you?
No.
Okay, so this is Halloween night of 1977, which I'm guessing every kid in America that night was wearing some form of Star Wars costume.
Probably.
The parents of 19-month-old Nema Louise Carter placed their child inside her crib at their Lawton, Oklahoma home. The next morning, Nema's parents awoke and they were shocked to discover she was missing. Since the windows in Nema's bedroom were locked, it is theorized that her abductor had been hiding in the closet and sneaked the child out of the house while her parents were sleeping in the living room. A month later, a group of kids were playing in an abandoned house 4 blocks away from the Carter home. When they opened up the house's refrigerator, they received a horrifying shock when the decomposed body of an infant came tumbling out. The child was identified as Nema Louise Carter, who had died of suffocation. Okay, so all of those images are horrifying. You have a child on Halloween night put in their crib, disappearing from what is essentially a locked room, and then a month later, kids go into an abandoned house, not even outside of the neighborhood, really, just 4 blocks away. And when they open up the abandoned house's refrigerator, there is a decomposing infant inside. That is all horrifying to me. There's nothing about that story. Like, that's something Stephen King would write.
I don't even think he would write that. It's too bad. It's too much.
So, according to the continued blurb here, a similar crime had occurred in Lawton in April of 1976 when a pair of 3-year-old twin sisters, Mary and Tina Carpenter, were lured out of their home by a young woman and forcibly confined inside of a refrigerator at another abandoned house. When the girls were found 2 days later, Mary had suffocated, but Tina managed to survive. Tina identified her abductor as a local teenage babysitter named Jacqueline Robideau. However, the child's age made her testimony unreliable, and there wasn't enough corroborating evidence to file charges at that time. Jacqueline Robideau eventually became a babysitter for Nema Louise Carter. She was an obvious suspect after Nema's murder, but once again, there was no evidence to implicate her. Years later, Robideau was finally charged with Mary Carpenter's murder and given a life sentence. She died in prison of liver cancer in 2005, but never admitted to the still unsolved murder of Nema Louise Carter. So I disagree with this being on an unsolved list. Like, I get that it's technically unsolved, but like, okay, if the images from the first part of that weren't horrifying enough, this is literally Stephen King. You have 2 3-year-old twins, okay, in 1976. They get lured out of their home by a teenager and they are put inside a refrigerator at an abandoned house. Okay, so how many abandoned houses are in this neighborhood? Because we need to just go look in all of them in 1976 all the time.
That's why they started warning about not letting your kids play in refrigerators.
You were close to a pair of twins growing up, right?
I was, yeah.
And I'm married to a twin. I cannot imagine how horrifying it would be for a twin to be trapped with their dead twin.
It'd be pretty bad. I can't imagine. So this is a situation where I'm gonna. I don't know what the motive here would be, and I also don't know how old she was. I know it says she was a teenager, but what makes a teenager take children they've babysat surreptitiously out of their warm cozy beds and like cruelly put them in a refrigerator to die?
Well, we actually briefly talk about Jacqueline Robideau in another episode earlier on. So when all of this happened, she would have been 16 in one case and 17 in the other case. She was born May 5th, 1959. Am I saying that right? 1976, she would have been 17. 1977, she would have been 18. I said 16 and 17, but it actually is 17 and 18. And she's not convicted until the 80s. I was just trying to give you the ages on it. I have no idea. Like, that's just...
Well, and so so here's what I'm saying though. Like maybe it was some sort of like twisted revenge and she like hated the babysitting these kids or she was jealous of them or something, right? There could be something there. Revenge wise. But otherwise it makes me think that she was just, she was going to be a serial killer, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ultimately.
Based on without additional information to sort of, explain whatever her motive was. It's very, very harsh, right? It's almost unthinkable to think about putting a 19-month-old and then 2-3-year-olds in a refrigerator to die. And, she purposefully did it. And of course, she didn't count on one of the twins surviving, right?
No, she did not.
And then, it was a slap in the face that the police didn't feel like this child's testimony was enough.
Yeah.
Because essentially, if they had done something at that point, then the baby, the 19-month-old, would have not been subjected to it because she would have already been in jail, right? So that's a big thorn in everybody's side.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever looked at the court documents in this case. They're fascinating. They do lay out some interesting stuff because it happens later. So you've got the Carpenter murder in 1976, and then the Halloween 1977 death of Nima Carter, and then you've got the trial later. Because of that, they do talk about both cases in court. So with the appellate documents, if you go and pull them up, which is Robideau versus State, I think they're decided in 1985 as far as the appellate side of it. They list 8 factors that were very interesting related to the Carter case and the Carpenter case. The appellate had babysat and spent time with all of the victims was number 1. Number 2 was the victims were abducted from their homes. Number 3, the appellant had access to the homes of the victims. 4, the victims were very young. 5, all of the victims were American Indians. 6, the victims were placed in refrigerators and suffocated. 7, the victims were found in abandoned houses where witnesses had previously observed the appellant. And then the victims died and lived and died in houses in the same neighborhood where the appellant lived. So there's a lot of like different things that went on. One of those things was she was pulling fire alarms, meaning she being Jacqueline Robideau. The twin that survived had a full story where, although she was not totally considered credible because of the age and the lapse of time, she told a story where the appellant, who was a friend of her Aunt Thomasina, had put her and her sister into the refrigerator. And she testified that Jackie had entered their grandmother's living room while they were watching television on the afternoon of April 8th, 1976, and told them to come with her. They walked several blocks to this house where they were told to get into the refrigerator and that Aunt Thomasina was coming to get them later and take them for ice cream. So it's a horrifying story. Like this is definitely
I
a
don't see how they
Halloween
didn't
worthy.
find that credible.
There was something about the way it was presented. I think she sang or was kind of sing-songy. I don't know. I've never seen
Well, she
the
didn't make
testimony.
that up, so I feel like that was somebody's call, and they just made the wrong call.
Okay, so this one gets a thumbs up for like being super creepy for the Halloween story, even though it's a sort of, that one takes place in April and the other one takes part in Halloween 1977. We don't think that it's an unsolved story by any means.
Well, it is unsolved. And as far as like, there has been no adjudication for this baby's death.
Yeah, you're correct.
And
That's
so
100%
I don't want to lessen it, but it's one of the cases that, while unsolved, it's really not unsolved. It's just unadjudicated. And this woman's dead at this point in time. She died in 2005 of liver cancer while incarcerated for the other murder. I hope that the baby's family found some peace in knowing that they were able to collect enough evidence and get her charged on at least one of her crimes. That now the age thing is weird, but that teenager had serious problems, and I don't know that any of those problems were addressed. I would say you might want to take a look around in the area and see if anything else weird happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I would tend to agree there.
She wasn't free for very long, though. It looks like 1981, maybe. Is that right?
I think 1981 is when the court stuff started for her case.
Or maybe 1983, which that would actually be longer. But
that's the trial, and then the appeal is in 1985.
You gotta keep in mind, after she did it to two kids, to the twins, essentially got away with it, right? Even though one of them had survived, she went on to do it again. And that's one of those things where, like, a lot of times a close call causes somebody to back off, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like she, like, took it as a challenge.
I think that she definitely upped her game. This was horrifying to me. Like,
and the kind of personality that is it should horrify everybody, because it's a scary person.
Yeah, it's so difficult for me to think of kids killing kids like that. And I know it happens.
Well, just to be clear, she just put them in the refrigerator.
Somehow, and I understand what you're saying. I'm just going to point out to you that just putting them in the refrigerator does not make me feel better.
Well, it shouldn't. And it's not dismissing her actions, but I'm saying, like, she didn't have to have the wherewithal and the badness in her to, like, strangle them to death or, cut them up, or I don't know, however somebody else would have killed them, right? She literally just they died an agonizing death, suffocating to death by themselves in the dark, right? These are small children. Okay. And so all she had to do was put them in the refrigerator. Every, like, nerve ending and cell of her body should have been telling her that, like, she didn't need to close the refrigerator door on these kids, but it wasn't doing that for some reason, right? But she wasn't what would be, because she killed them. Don't get me wrong, and legally speaking, it makes no difference whether all you do is shut the refrigerator door or not. Okay. But the psychological aspect of it, I do feel like is different, right? Because she essentially didn't really get her hands dirty, so to speak.
I understand what you're saying, but you have to understand from my perspective that that makes it creepier.
Well, it definitely changes things. And again, I'm not saying that shutting the okay, so if you had to say what's easier to do, putting somebody in a position where they're going to die, like shutting the refrigerator, or strangling them? Well, it's easier to shut the door, right?
Yeah. It is easier, but for some reason, I understand what you're saying. It would have been a more difficult homicide to strangle someone.
Well, and it also is a different mindset for the person doing it.
It doesn't make it less creepy.
No, it makes it. What I'm saying is, okay. If you don't have, if you have the power to kill somebody without going through killing them, going through the process of having to manually kill them, it makes it more creepy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Because how many kids could she have put in a refrigerator, right? I mean,
it makes me want to go look and see if there's missing people in that area.
I'm just saying, like, that mindset that she had, and the fact that, it happened to 3 children, 1 survived, that mindset, I feel like it might be an underexplored avenue.
Yeah, I'm torn. I'm with you, and the images are creepier, and there is a whole lot going on there. It makes me wonder if it's not like laziness.
I don't think it's laziness. It's because how does a serial killer get their fill of whatever they're doing? Because they're not motivated for love, money, or revenge, right? They've got to have a motivation. Their motivation is they want to kill someone, right? And so they thrive off of the killing part of it. And in this case, did she want these children dead for some reason? Was it a traditionally motivated killing, like she was mad at their parents because they stiffed her? Or I don't know why you would want to kill a child, right? But or was it like this switch that got flipped and it's different?
I'm not sure. That's why I was sort of reading off the checklist that they, I wondered if it was racially motivated.
Well, she's an Indian too.
So, okay, then I guess
she's an American. It says American Indian in the thing. I don't know what the politically correct thing is at the moment, but she was also an American Indian.
Yeah, that's how it's written up in the court records. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And according to where her intake form, she was as well. So it's not, if it was, we talked about that yesterday. If it was racially motivated, then it was misunderstood.
To say the least, someone misunderstood something there. So that's what I wanted to cover from the listicle, and I'm including it in the show notes if you want to go get creeped out. There's a couple of other creepy stories in here. I'm not gonna name them. I'm just gonna drop this in here. There was one story that I have not figured out what happened, but it's not really something I was prepared to cover. I just wanted to have a little Halloween episode to release for. Do you guys trick or treat over there or no?
No.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a really. I did trunk or treating for a little while.
Yeah, Halloween goes pretty much on anything here at this point. We used to do it, but kids at a certain point they're done, and then sometimes they come back around to it, right?
Yeah.
But it's just not a big deal at my house. If we want candy, we just get it from the store.
I sort of mentioned it in passing. I was like, do we want to do a big last hoorah Halloween thing? And my kid was like, there's candy here, and you run around wearing creepy masks all the time. All you talk about is this crime stuff. Why would we do something scary for Halloween? I guess
Yeah.
I
I'm kind
guess
of
it's kind
second
of
that, honestly. I mean, I will agree that it was really fun to dress up. Especially, it was fun when I was a kid, and then it was fun when I had a small child. Um, and it was really fun, but it was also a whole lot of work.
yeah.
And it would go well. Now, I mean, my child is at the age where, I mean, he's a teenager. He's like, I'm not doing it, right? And that's that. um and I do miss him being young and excited about, one of his favorite things to be was Doctor Who.
Ah,
And he also was like all of the Star Wars characters, of course. um and so it was really fun when he was little, but it's over now.
yeah. We don't even get trick or treaters out here. Like we don't have like I live far enough away from the main road
I was gonna
that
say, I doubt they would walk down your driveway.
yeah. It was when we first like moved in here permanently or like full time. I guess my wife was so disappointed because when she and I met and were like first together, we were living in we had an apartment that was in like a downtown area, and
Right, so they
that
got a lot of trick-or-treaters.
yeah, it was actually like a no, like the neighborhood that we lived in then um, is a huge part of a huge city, right on the edge of the city, but still like you could walk across like out of the front yard and across this little bridge, and you were in downtown.
Yeah.
So people would come out there, and we would have all sorts of people in that neighborhood. It was known for being sort of I think they called it an arts district, but it was all these old homes, and we'd see people on the sidewalks. There'd be all sorts of parties going on, and within a few blocks there were at least two, maybe three colleges, and we would always see people. When we moved out here the first year, like she got candy and she had the bowl and all that stuff, and I just looked at the driveway and I was like, nobody's coming down that driveway in the dark. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so. I I always have a little bit of candy just in case, because I don't turn my lights on or anything, and I have a very unwelcoming sign on my door just for daily life. But occasionally, I'll get like a 2-year-old who like climbs, all 13 of my front steps. And then they like knock on the door, and of course I'm watching on the cameras, and I can't be mean to them because they're so adorable, all dressed up, and they just want some candy. So I try to keep some, and I'll give it to them, but then just start ignoring everybody because once it gets dark, my lights aren't on, people aren't going to come up.
Yeah, that's how it is here. I try to remember to turn the lights off, but occasionally, and it's always small people, like really, like really young people. They see their parents see the lights on, and they end up making their way down here.
Man, they're so cute, and I just can't be mean to cute little ladybugs or ballerinas or whatever they are.
We had a Scooby Doo 2 years ago,
Aww.
like right before COVID hit. We had a Scooby Doo.
The funniest thing that ever happened, it wasn't, I mean, a lot of funny things have happened, but when my nephew was born, he just turned 13, and he was born in September, and his first Halloween, so he's like not even a month old. He's not even a month old, right? And we went trick or treating, and I was collecting candy for my 2-year-old, and my brother was collecting candy for his like less than a month old baby. And the lady was like, are you guys gonna give some candy to the kids? And we just like looked at her like, well, okay. Because obviously we weren't collecting the candy for ourselves. I mean, I don't know how much candy the baby was going to eat, right? But this was this whole experience we were having, right?
Yeah.
But the lady acted like we were trick or treating.
Jeez.
Oh, it was pretty funny.
Thank you for joining us We are sponsored by LabrottieCreations.com. You can check them out at LabrottieCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange? Come with us in UNC. There's a ton of Halloween. This is Halloween, this is Halloween. Pumpkin Street in the dead of night. This is Halloween, everybody make a sweet trick or treat till the neighbor's gonna die of fright. In our town, everybody's screaming the sound of Halloween. Halloween, 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 Halloween. In this town, we go home. Everyone held to the pumpkin zone. In this town, don't we love it now? Everybody's waiting for the next to